Intertalk Radio. You're in to all things music.
Welcome to Intersect Radio, where music, faith, and life converge. With your host, Aaron the A-Train Smith.
And welcome to this edition of Intersect Radio here at the Intertalk Radio Network. I'm your host, A-Train, and I'm glad you guys could take some time out of your days or schedules to listen into the program. We all appreciate that very much. Today, my guest is once again Mr. Ric Hordinski. Rich is considered by most to be the consummate guitarist, composer, arranger. His resume is just like busting over with creds, and we have posted that resume at our site here at Intersect Radio. You're going to have to allow for at least 5 to 10 minutes just to read that, okay? So the show is an hour long, and reading Rich's resume is going to take you like 10, 15 minutes. But I'm so glad that he has agreed to come back and talk with us because, well, first of all, hello, Rich. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Thank you for asking.
Hey, thank you for coming back on the show. I know you're a busy guy, and you know it's kind of hard to set aside time to do one specific thing sometimes, and I appreciate you doing this for us.
Oh, I'm honored to do it. Thank you.
All right. Well, you know, if you guys would listen to the first interview, I thought it was great. I listened to it, and I was just really impressed by all the stories Rich has to tell about all of his many experiences in music and all the great people he's worked with. Adrian Belew, Tony Levin, just a host of others. My Morning Jacket. People like that, you know? And here in Nashville, you know, we don't get exposure to. Well, I can't say that. Tony Levin and those guys. Adrian Belew actually lives here, so but you know we don't get to see him play or go out to hear a concert or anything. But anyway, so it was a great connect for me to know that I know somebody who's had that experience and. Like I said in the beginning, you know, we don't see each other that much, but it's a kindred spirit there that I have with Rich. And hopefully hopefully in the days to come, we can make that more of a one-on-one contact, personal sort of thing.
I'd like that. Yeah.
Matter of fact, I was talking to Jimmy Abegg yesterday, and he listened to the interview, and he really liked it.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and
miss him.
He said, "You know what we should do?" And I went, "No, what? We should jump in the car and go up to Cincinnati and crash for about 3 days and just
Absolutely.
jam."
Oh, that'd be so fun. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. So
You have a bass player.
Yeah, I was
That'd be a
telling
blast.
who was the kid that played with us?
Terrell Montgomery.
Terrell. Yeah, Terrell, man, that's the guy.
Yeah,
That would be cool.
lovely.
So Jimmy and I are doing a gig together this weekend with Kevin Max out at
Oh, right on.
out at Johnny Cash's museum.
Woo.
But so I asked Rich to come back on the show because, as you all know, if you've listened to the show, this is about musicians and their faith and how their faith has influenced their lives and has influenced their art and the things they do, and how it was before faith and after faith, pre and post, if anything changed. And usually things do. And so when I asked Rich to be on the show, he looked at the content and he texted me back and he said, well, man, I don't know. You might want to reconsider me. I might not be the guy you're looking for. And I said, why is that? And you said,
What did I say? I think I said, I don't know what I said. I think I said something like, I think your show's mostly about interviewing, Christians, and I'm not really, haven't been in that camp for a long time. And so I just didn't want to get 45 minutes into this and you'd be like, what?
No. But I thought you're the perfect candidate for this show, and I still do. Because, I know you have experience in CCM. I know you, and my first contact with you has been through this music medium. So I know it's something there, and that's what I want you to tell us about today. You said
Sure.
in the first interview that you came down to Cincinnati from Cleveland, that area, because you knew of a Christian band whose guitar player was leaving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Is that correct? Okay.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So
So I should probably back up a little bit.
yeah.
Should I do that? Okay.
Yeah.
So I was raised in Cleveland, outside of Cleveland, in the suburbs, and my on a like if you want to call it spiritual track or path or whatever, my dad's family was Polish Catholic from way back, immigrant grandparents, etc. And so my dad was Catholic and my mom was from North Carolina. So she was like raised in the Southern Baptist thing,
Mm-hmm.
So
What part of North Carolina?
She was in not too far from Wilmington, a little town called Magnolia.
Okay.
Beautiful little town. Out Warsaw is out that way. Lovely. It's that Southern thing where there's that there's so much interesting, cool stuff about that culture, but it's sort of underpinned with racism throughout. And so it's really hard for me to look back on that and to be like, well, I really enjoyed this, and then I have to see that in the larger picture of that context of horrible racism that was there, and in small towns, I'm afraid still is there.
Yeah.
Painted throughout. And sometime I have to tell you a story about my grandfather down there because he had a really interesting story, but. But anyway, so my mom came from that Baptist background, and in those days you had to convert to Catholicism to marry Catholic. So she converted to Catholicism, and so they struck this kind of bargain that I would have to be Catholic until I made my first communion, which I think you do at like 9 or 10 or 12 or something. Mm-hmm. And then from then on, I would go to the Protestant church with my mom. So it was interesting in my really young days going to the Catholic church, which I liked the atmosphere of it. I remember going downtown. My dad used to go to confession at this huge old church in downtown, And we'd go on a Saturday afternoon, and it was just this massive space, and the sound of it was so amazing. I just remember every time someone would put one of those little kneeling benches down, it just had this like 5-second reverb, it was like, and it felt kind of magical, the smell of the candles, the kind of cool darkness that was there. And that had a real, I really loved that quietness and that contemplation. And then when I made my first communion, I kind of went over to my mom's church, and I didn't, I wasn't in on any of this. They just kind of said, okay, now you're doing this. And I was like, okay, I just assumed this is what everybody did. Right. So my mom went to a lot of crazy holy roller, not quite snake handling churches, one of the churches we went to, they were really into the faith healing thing. And so they took this woman off of her diabetes medication, took her off of insulin because they were sure that God was going to heal her. And then she died. And I remember, watching TV one night, I'm like, hey, Mom, our church is on the national news. Because this person, they were going to indict the pastor or something for taking her off of medication. And they would do that. They would do that thing where they would want you to do the speaking in tongues thing, and so they would take young kids and make them come up to the front of the church in front of the whole congregation. They would be like, "Now speak in tongues right now," So there was a lot of weird, a lot of awkward pressure, I think, and the whole, and they were also very into the whole God loves you, but He may send you to hell for eternity. So just work on that for a while. Which I never could quite get around that. So that was kind of my history. And then I wound up going to a Christian college, a Quaker college in northeastern Ohio called Malone College. And it was pretty conservative. There was no dancing allowed on campus. You couldn't have any alcohol on campus. There was boys couldn't be in the girls' dorms and vice versa. It was an interesting experience, and I didn't really know any better. I thought that's what colleges were like. So I went there. I was a music major. I had sort of a split major between jazz and classical, and that's where I met the people who would eventually all be Over the Rhine. We were in bands together in college, and we played clubs together in college. Matter of fact, Linford, the other the writer and other guy in Over the Rhine, and I played in a funk band in college. It was really interesting.
Oh,
and
cool.
I had no business being in a funk band in college, but I learned a lot. It was really fun. We were playing Michael Jackson and James Ingram, and the kind of pop, soul, funk, Anita Baker, all that kind of stuff that was popular in the early '80s or late '80s. But that was kind of where I was coming from. So when I left college to join this band, it was kind of a normal feeling for me to do it when I moved to Cincinnati. And then I toured with that band for a little while, and then I think I was playing at the Cornerstone Festival, which is that festival in Chicago, which is probably where you and I met, honestly, unless we met in Nashville. We probably met at that festival, but when I was there, someone asked me if I would audition for Margaret Becker's band. I think I was playing guitar for Larry Norman actually then, but and I auditioned for Margaret's band, and that's when I started sort of really doing the sideman thing in that CCM world. And it was good training for me. It was my first sort of professional gig. You had to show up, you had to have your shit together, you had to be on time, you had to know your parts, you had to be able to sing and play at the same, the whole thing. That was where I met Charlie.
You said Charlie was asking you to play 3 guitar parts.
Yeah. He wasn't asking me. He was just expecting it. And how he is, he's really nice, but you just have to do it. There's not really a way out, and you don't want to disappoint him.
Right.
So that was kind of.
I just saw Charlie, and he sends his best as well.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Charlie. Yeah, I look forward to seeing him again soon. So that was kind of how I got into that world. So I did that for a few years. I did that tour with Michael W. Smith, and I did a few other tours. And during that time, I had been working on music with Linford Detweiler and Karen Berquist, who we formed Over the Rhine with. And about, I don't know when that would have been, 89, 90, something like that. We kind of finished our first record, and I started, we started playing shows. And so it was kind of rough for me because I had gone from these, relatively nice tours where someone's setting up my gear and tearing down my gear and staying in reasonable hotels to like I remember one of our first tours was with Adrian Ballou, and we had 5 people in one hotel room, so we took turns sleeping on the floor.
Wow.
So that was a little bit of a like, oh, okay, so that's what this is like.
Oh my goodness.
So that was kind of how that's how I kind of got into that world. And then that's also sort of, I mean, it wasn't like I ever had a moment where I was like, oh my gosh, I have to stop doing this. But I eventually got to the point where I had been in college. The guy that I studied with, Michael Vahila, amazing guitar player, was my teacher. And he was really into a lot of like Eastern music, Indian music. He was like a generation older than me, so he was really into like John McLaughlin and Shakti and all that kind of stuff. He kind of turned into Indian music and Asian music. And I don't know if we talked about this last time, but I remember coming over to his house one time for a lesson, and I came over at the wrong time, and he was meditating, and I was like, meditating? What are you doing? So he was like, well, I sit here for like an hour in the afternoon. I had never really heard of it before.
Yeah.
And he gave me this book, which is a classic for guitar players, called The Natural Classical Guitar by this guy named Frank Ryan. And I still give it to my students to this day. And it's mostly about how to play in a way that's natural and doesn't cause you physical problems later in life. And I know there's a lot of drum theory about this too, how you make your motions natural so you don't wear out your joints and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of the same idea in guitar. But in that book, he also talked a lot about meditation and in a sort of, cultural late 60s, early 70s way. He was talking about Zen, he was talking about Buddhism. And it always had a kind of resonance for me, and I kind of kept reading about it over the years. And I don't know, sometime in the mid 90s, I guess, I was involved with I don't know if it was playing Cornerstone Festival or one of these music festivals, and they would go, you'd be in a room and they would be asking everybody to pray out loud or something, and it always made me horribly uncomfortable. I mean, I'm kind of an introvert anyway, but I just realized that I was like, you know what, I don't believe this anymore. And it was a moment of like, I don't know that I've believed it for a long time, But it was it had been a cultural thing for me that I had grown up with it, and I hadn't really, I hadn't really thought about it in any sort of rational way. And so at some point in there, I just kind of moved away from it. And my interest in my practice with Buddhism has nothing to do with the supernatural or anything like that. It's mostly just about being mindful, and it really came from music and the understanding that you have those moments in music where you're sort of playing over your head, or when you're in an amazing groove and you feel like it's such a great groove you can't get out of it if you tried. And I found that the kind of study of Zen and the way your subconscious works and preparing your subconscious to do that kind of stuff, it just made a kind of logical sense to me. So that was kind of where my emphasis moved sometime in the 90s, and it's kind of been there ever since.
So you're a practicing Buddhist?
Yeah. I mean, I'm probably a really badly practicing Buddhist, but yeah, I mean, if you have to,
what would make you a better practicing Buddhist?
Probably doing more meditation than I. But there's a group in my neighborhood that I really love, and we've been, the Buddhists call it sitting. They don't really necessarily call it meditation; they call it sitting. And so we sit twice a week, and it's a really wonderful thing. It's probably the most integrated group that I'm with all week long. It's like poor people and moderately wealthy people and black people and white people and mixed people. And some people come and some people only come now and then. But it's just it's kind of what I've always hoped a church would be, churches, Christian churches. And this is just in America. That's my main experiences. But, Martin Luther King said it's the most segregated hour in America, right?
Right.
This Sunday morning. And this sort of hits me as the way I'd always hoped that other thing would be, and probably is in some context, but I never got to experience that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you know this about me, is that back in the 70s, I moved to Boston, and I had just finished playing with Miroslav Vitus and really getting into jazz, and I moved to Boston to study with Alan Dawson. And I went to Berkeley for a semester because I enrolled at Berkeley because that's where Alan was at the time.
Sure.
And by the time I made it to Boston, he had left Berkeley and started teaching privately out of his home in Lexington. And man, I was so curious about discipline, and creativity and where that all came from. And because I started when Miroslav introduced me to, Jack DeJohnette, Tony Williams, and I was listening to Mahavishnu and Shakti, and Chick Corea and all those guys, back in the 70s, all those guys had record deals, they're playing in each other's bands, but and I was just curious about their motivation, and so I noticed that each one of them had, well, when you talk about McLaughlin, Chick Corea, Wayne Shorter, Herbie Hancock, those guys, they all had some sort of spiritual connect, Herbie was Buddhism, Wayne Shorter was Buddhism, John McLaughlin had Sri Chinmoy, and Chick was a Scientologist, is a Scientologist.
Yeah.
And so
Coltrane was Buddhist too, kind of.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right. So I started searching that stuff, and I finally ended up at Self-Realization Fellowship, Paramahansa Yogananda, and I really got into that, man. I was meditating sometimes 3 hours a day.
Wow, that's a long
just
time.
Like really, and it really changed my life. It did make me disciplined, and I could concentrate, and and stuff like that. But one thing that it didn't do for me, it didn't make me friendlier.
Right.
I guess I was so self-consumed with it, and I was learning so much so fast as far as being a drummer and stuff like that, and taking lessons once a week and prepping for those and spending time with Alan, and that it didn't make me more extroverted. It made me more introverted, and
I could see that for sure.
Yeah, and I've often since being a Christian now and coming to Christ, I kind of abandoned meditation, and I've recently considered just trying to start the practice again. Because I'm not meditating to call upon some foreign god or something to come and rescue me for anything. But it's more of a centering and clearing my mind and a clear, for a better thought process.
Yeah.
So, so what do you think about as a Buddhist now? What did you do with Jesus?
Well, that's a good question. So there's this author that I really like, Mary Doria Russell, and she wrote in an essay one time that there were basically two religions there's two kinds of Christianity, she said. There's the one that Jesus taught, which is like, blessed are the meek, love one another, take care of the poor, how you treat other people is how you treat me. And so there's the religion that Jesus taught, she says, and then she says there's a religion about him. And I've always thought that was a really interesting distinction. And there's a spectrum, of course. Some versions of Christianity are all one and all the other, and some are more in the middle. But I've never had a problem with the religion that Jesus taught. And, it's one of those things where all of those concepts are central to the best parts of, Jainism and Hinduism and Buddhism. They all have said those things. They've all said treat other people the way you want to be treated and take care of the poor and the widow. So I have no problem with that. I just, to me, the supernatural part of it is where I have to suspend my disbelief or whatever. I don't. There's a lot of, on a strictly rational level, if you believe in a God that's all powerful and all loving, you have a lot of work to do to reconcile that with the world you see around you. And I'm not passing judgment on people who believe differently than me. I'm the first person to say I could be completely wrong about all this, and 5 years from now, I might have a completely different view. So I do not want to be in any way adamant about it. But the supernatural part of it doesn't really recommend itself to me that way.
When you say supernatural part, I'm not really clear on that.
Sure. So in the kind of like Chan was the Chinese word, and in Japan they called it Zen Buddhism. They sort of there's a famous story about someone asking Buddha about whether there was a God, and he said asking whether there's a God is like getting shot by an arrow, right? And you get shot by this arrow, and someone's like, "Hey, I want to pull that arrow out," and he's like, "Wait, I need to find out who shot this arrow and what kind of arrow and who made the arrow." And he said, asking about whether there's a God, like there's so much stuff we should just do right now before we even worry about that. So his and it's almost certainly an apocryphal tale that somebody made up later. I love that. I mean, that's one of the things that I love about Buddhism, and I think that Christians would benefit from too. Often is that if you ask a Buddhist, like, so there's all these sayings, they're like, did the Buddha really say them? And they'll be like, nah, probably not. But the thing is, like, we found these things to be useful for a couple thousand years. So these are the things that have sort of stood the test of time, and that's why we follow them, not because this guy said them, because he probably didn't say half of those, But that's not really, I like that that's not really the point, Like, I feel like in Christianity, if people were like, well, Jesus probably said that, but really it's just a good idea. Like, it's a good idea to take care of poor people. It's a good idea to not tear gas children. Like, those are just good ideas. We think that Jesus said that, but even if he didn't say it, like, it's kind of a good thing to do.
Right. For some reason, we instinctively know that that's a good thing.
You think, you would think that. It's always surprising to me that some people come out on the other side of that. But so the supernatural part of it, like whether there is like a God who intervenes in people's lives, whether it's on the level of like preventing the Holocaust or providing someone with like a parking space, that thing. I just feel like if I had to say yes or no, I would say no, but I don't really care because I don't see that. I don't see that intervening happening on a consistent, predictable level. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's kind of an old joke about God sitting up there and someone's like, so why do you deal with this prayer thing? Isn't it a pain in the butt? And God's like, hey, check it out. The way this works, people pray to me. When things go well, I get all the credit. When things go badly, they never blame me. It's always something else. They blame the devil, whatever. Like, it's a win-win situation. It's kind of funny, but still, you know what I mean? So like,
I know what you mean.
I can't draw a straight line from someone saying, hey God, I got a cold. Can you help me with this?
Right.
to them not having a cult. So I just try to set that part aside and say, you know what, if believing in that makes you a kinder, better person, then I'm all for it.
Yeah.
If it makes you someone who fears people who have other religions, or if it makes you hate people that don't look like you, then I'm not all for it. You know,
right?
Because it can go both ways.
And it's the thing we do with religion too. I mean, it's like that television program that's out now, God Texted Me.
No, I'm not.
Have you seen that?
No.
Yeah, it's some program that just started. And then you had programs like Touched by an Angel and things like that. They kind of like, I don't know, it just kind of took, takes the things we know from the Bible and kind of turns them into like a parody or something. You know what I'm saying?
I haven't seen those, but I think I know what you mean.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, there are people who are a lot smarter than me that have different beliefs than me, and so like I am not trying to pretend I'm right or I have all the answers or anything.
Yeah. Understood. Well, our current situation here in the United States has really shaken up the church, and has a lot of Christians like wondering what happened.
Yeah,
and those very things about what did Jesus say have been ignored.
That's so hard to understand. Yeah, I saw. I think it was a quote from Stephen Colbert who said, if we're not going to care about the poor and we're not going to take care of refugees and immigrants, then we have to kind of stop saying we're a Christian nation.
Right.
Like those are not peripheral things,
Mm-hmm.
Like those are core principles of Christianity. So, it's a weird time.
Really, have we ever been a Christian nation?
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, that's.
Yeah, but I get his take on it, It does cause you to pause,
Well,
and it's made me very suspicious. I don't know within the Christian realm who to trust anymore. Because I just spent 15 years at this church, and I love that church because I love the pastor, and I learned a lot. I learned so much that he taught me into a place, and then he taught me out of that place. That make any sense?
I think so. Yeah.
The theology, because he's a brilliant guy, and we had these classes on Thursday morning, theology for breakfast. And when I first met him, I didn't know anything about that. Theology wasn't really important to me. I knew I believed in Jesus, and that was kind of it. And then I got into these theology classes, and I really got into them and started learning the meaning of terminologies, why people believe this, why people that, Reformed theology, Arminianism, just on and on, and then you get to the grace part of it. And then when he even had a kind of a transformation and just started really accentuating grace, which I totally agree with. But that's where he taught me out of where he had talked me into,
Interesting.
Because the knowledge can puff you up, and you can kind of get to a point where even amongst other Christians, like if you don't believe the way I believe, and I think that the way I believe is correct, then we have some issues, we have some problems. But then, you know, when you're taught the grace part, you come to realize that really doesn't matter. You know, it's what do you think about Jesus? And do you believe he is the Son of God? Yes, I believe that. So that's what's that's what's important. It's not all that other stuff. Although I'm glad I went through it to get to here. So what I'm saying is, I eventually left that church because he left that church. The pastor left the church, and I went, okay, well, I guess it's time for us to go too, because so we're not church affiliated anymore. But I still, you know, here lately I've been going to this one church because they asked me to play on Sunday morning. So
oh, nice.
So it's kind of intermittent, you know.
Yeah.
I don't go every Sunday.
My wife is a Christian, and we go. I go with her sometimes too. There's an Episcopal church downtown that we go to sometimes. My daughter goes there for youth group stuff, and you know they're an interesting group, Episcopal church. The music is really good most of the time, and so that kind of goes a long way. It's a very formal service, almost like a Catholic service. So it has a lot of structure to it. It can be a little boring sometimes, but you know, I try to remind myself that I'm not really there to be entertained. You know, it's not a movie.
Right.
I don't have to be occupied for an hour and a half. I just have to do the dance, you know.
So when you were playing with Over the Rhine, and as far as your faith at that time, did you think you were like ministering to your audience or serving the Christian community in some way?
I don't know. I don't think I would have thought of it that way. I mean, I would still like to think that, you know, if I'm doing music that's moving people or connecting with people, that's a kind of you know, ministry in the old sense of the word. You know, it's not necessarily some kind of supernatural act, but it's like it's kind of like, you know, last night we made some food and took it over to this place where they rescue women from prostitution and drug abuse. You know, so we made dinner for like 30 people. So like that's a, you know, whatever you want to call that, serving. I feel like I hopefully on a very tiny level, playing really good guitar maybe does that. You know, if you can reach somebody, and just, I don't know. I probably have too emotional a view of that, but I feel like if I'm connecting with somebody musically, hopefully that's doing a service for them. I wouldn't want to do this if I didn't believe that, I think. Right.
Well, you know, some Christian musicians, you know, they call what they do their ministry, you know.
Yeah. And I get that. I would hope that it would be the really broad sense that, like, you know, it's the way I treat my neighbors is a ministry, and the way I react to politics is a ministry, and you probably know David Dark, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So David's an old friend. David and Sarah. I used to play guitar for Sarah too, back in the day, via Charlie. But you know, David would say, if you want to know what someone believes, look at their receipts. You know, what did they spend money on last week? That'll tell you what they believe in.
Yeah.
Or you know, look at their browsing history. That'll tell you what they believe in. So I kind of, you know, hopefully that all ties in and has some sort of an integrated. You know, it's not. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's dangerous if like your profession is how you feel like you serve people only. If that's the only way. You know, it can be a little bit of a cop out. You know, like, oh wow, I'm serving people by standing on stage in front of 3,000 people and having everybody tell me how awesome I am. Like, come on, dude. I think that might be about our egos.
Well, one thing about I told you I've been serving at this other church playing in a worship team, and it's been really a breath of fresh air because the atmosphere of that church, and I think the intent is still the same, but it's not so bogged down by we're reformed or we believe in predestination and election and that sort of thing. And I think the other church I was attending was that, it was kind of bogged down by that. And, and there was an intent to teach people who came to that church that sort of theology, that you were chosen by God. I mean, I think that's important to know. I believe I was chosen by God, but if somebody else loves Jesus too and they don't believe that, then I don't think that makes a difference, So it's been really nice to go to a different church and have an experience with a different congregation, different leadership. Man, I think your story is very interesting, and I didn't have any idea that you had ventured into Buddhism, but I think that's great. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that it seemed to make sense with the way I thought about music and the way I thought about life, and hopefully, the practice of it seems to be. Like I'm fully aware that everybody feels like whatever tradition they didn't grow up in is really exotic and interesting, right? Mm-hmm, and I'm certainly guilty of that. But I loved about Buddhism was that like they would say, okay, this is what you need to do, and here's how you do it. And in the churches that I went to, like when I was a kid, they would say, love your neighbor, and I'll see you next week, and I'd be like, gosh, my neighbor's kind of a jerk. How do I do that? And I'd come back next week. They'd be like, well, did you love your neighbor? I'm like, I don't think I did. I didn't. He was kind of a jerk. And I loved about Buddhism was more like, have compassion on your neighbor. Now here's how you do that. This is what you do. Every day, do this thing and this thing and this thing. And 6 months from now, you will feel different about your neighbor. And it's really it's really true, and it's really practical. And I know that there are spots in Christianity where that has happened, in monasteries and probably in some churches where it's very practical. But the part, where I grew up, it was just, you were just kind of on your own. They would be like, well, you need to feel this way and act this way. And I'd be like, but yeah, but it's really hard to do it. How do I do that? And they'd be kind of like, well, you just kind of got to do it. Like, well, that's not really helpful. So that was one thing that really drew me to Buddhism. They were like, you do this thing and you do this every day, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen this week, but 6 months from now, you're going to be a slightly different person. And 6 years from now, you'll be a very different person. And it seems to work. And, it works for me. That's all I can say. I can't say it would work for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's interesting that, you got two different things going on in your household there. And, I'm pretty sure you both influence each other.
Absolutely.
In a practical kind of way,
Yeah, no matter what I do, I will never be as good a person as my wife is. So that's just, it's aspirational.
I feel you, man. I don't even try to be as good as my wife. She's got, it's like I look at her and I go, oh my, thank you, Lord, for. I'm just going to be quiet and I'll tell her what I think, and then I'll wait for an answer. Because, man, she is so wise and she's really loving. I've learned a lot from her, and she's probably, she has been a reason for, she's added to my transformation, I guess you could say, how I believe and what I believe. And how I see other people and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, if you have the right attitude, marriage is the best crucible for learning how to be a better person. No way around it. If you have a good partner, it's the best. I mean, there's a verse in the Old Testament about iron sharpens iron.
Right.
Hopefully everybody, we work together to make each other better people. Another one of my favorite authors said in one of her books, we train each other to be human. When you have a kid, you have to train them to be human. You can't just expect that they're going to grow up to be a nice, compassionate person. You have to train them.
Right. I wanted to use a similar line on a lady who was flying with her infant son. He must have been like 3 years old, 2.5, and they were sitting right behind me the other day. And he was screaming so loud, wouldn't put on his seatbelt, kind of held up the flight a little bit because we couldn't take off until she forced him to sit in his seatbelt.
Oh, gosh.
And, and I wanted to stand up and go, okay, people, I know you're all agitated and mad at this little kid, but he is not the problem.
Yeah. You got to bite your tongue sometimes.
She is the problem.
And sadly, there's nothing you can do right now. It's going to take a few years to straighten this out.
Oh man, it's come this far already.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh man.
She's got to change her mothering style or something. That kid's getting ready with murder. But so what do you got coming up between now and Christmas?
I'm playing a show with a band in town here called the Mitchells. Really interesting, kind of textural, I don't know what you'd call it, kind of indie art rock or something band, chamber music band. It's kind of fun. Two guitar players, a bass player, a drummer. I'm playing like a third guitar, kind of textural stuff, and then there's a violinist and cellist that plays with it. There's some string arrangements that go with this. And yeah, it's really cool. We're doing it here at the monastery, and it's a concert like in the round. So the band, the guitar players all use multiple amps, and they're sort of spread out all over the room. So the sound doesn't come from one place. It's not even like quad. It doesn't even come from 4 places. It comes from like 8 places. Oh. So it's really cool. Depending on where you sit in the room, you get a different perspective on everything. So I'm looking forward to that. That's Saturday.
The Mitchells?
Mitchells, yeah.
Is that a family?
No, it's not. It's just the name of the band. They have a record that I produced called New Lawns that just came out.
Ah, cool.
It's a really nice record. Yeah, you should check it out.
Yeah, I will. I can find it on iTunes and stuff like that? Places like that?
So. I think so. This is the official release, but I think it's already available.
Okay. And what's the title?
I think it's called New Lawns. Like mow your lawn, new lawns.
New Lawns by the Mitchells.
Yeah. It's a cool record. It's an interesting, kind of textural, but it's real accessible. And then I think I usually do a little holiday show right before Christmas, and I'm sort of working out the details of that, but I think probably the weekend of the 15th, my buddy Josh and I'll set up a little local watering hole here and try to blow some stuff up.
Your studio is a lot like, I can see where, what you were saying about going to the Catholic Church and the ambiance there and the feeling there. I think you brought that back to your studio. Oh,
thanks. That's a nice compliment. I hope so. It feels peaceful most of the time.
Yeah.
It's a good space.
It helps. It helps to be in a church too. Building.
Yeah, and and it's a church building. Like there's been music in this building for 120 years. There was an Episcopal church in like the 1890s, and then it was like a Black Baptist church for about 50 years. So there's been a ton of music in this place. I'm glad it's got a good history.
Yeah, I remember when Charlie bought the art house. It was I used to commute to Nashville from Sacramento, and I stayed with him. And I was I was actually with him and Andy the day they decided to buy that
Oh,
place.
yeah?
Yeah. And
I thought it interesting that they lived in the sanctuary part. I would have made that the studio part, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I used to sleep up in the balcony.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, man.
The piano was down
I had
on
some
the floor.
I had some heavy dreams up there, man. I'm telling you.
Oh, yeah. I guess, did he sell that place?
Yeah, he did.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's still
out of Bellevue.
it's still art house. It's still the art house.
Okay.
It's tied to two. I think they have two other art houses around the country. One in Texas and
Okay.
one in Indiana. I think somewhere else. Yeah, and so he's still in it. He just doesn't live there anymore. Somebody else lives there. The art house organization has a couple living there from Australia.
Oh, right.
And,
does he still have the studio in the back?
Yeah, still has studio, still operational, still functioning, going strong. I just did a session with Charlie 2 weeks ago. We did a funk session. We did like 6 funk tunes. And
was that the one with Roger?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And Jerry McPherson on guitar.
Of course.
And I noticed what you said about Jerry last time.
Jerry's so good.
Charlie calls Jerry the Swiss Army knife of guitar players.
That is very true. Very true. He's got a deep well of styles he can hit on.
Yeah, he does. He's got a lot of gear, and he knows how to use all of it.
He does have a lot of gear. My gosh, he has a lot of gear.
It's just like,
but the thing about Jerry is that he has good time. You know, and like that's just, I keep trying to tell my students, like, that is everything.
Yeah,
your time is everything.
Yeah,
it's probably more important than your melodic content. Like, but yeah,
how you fit in the groove, that kind of time.
Oh yeah, I mean, just having good time and being able to grow to be aware of where your time is and how to play. How to play a little more on top, or how to play a little bit more behind, or just how that even feels, and how to recognize it if other people. I don't know.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. You still have those same students that you had when I came up?
At the school, yeah. So at the school, they're finishing up their semester next week, and I'll have some of those students on and off throughout their college careers. I teach a couple. Like some of the students that are in the recording class now, I'll have in like songwriting and lyric writing next year. So I see them over the course of several years.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's great, man.
Yeah.
It's a great gig.
It's inspiring and enjoyable.
Is it snowing up there yet?
It snowed a couple days ago. I'm ready for it to go. It's supposed to be like 50 tomorrow. It's supposed to be nice and warm tomorrow. So keeping my fingers crossed.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm not ready. It's freezing cold down here.
I know. I'm not mentally prepared.
No, me either. I'm not ready. I need a slower transition into winter.
Yeah, and you guys don't even get that much snow, really.
I know, but we just get like damp, cold air.
Yeah,
chill down to the bone. Kind of cold.
That's how it is here. I feel like I can't get warm.
Yeah. So when does the group meet? Tell me, that record you were mixing last time? It was for an interfaith group. What's called?
Oh yeah,
Just Love.
Just Love. Yeah, Love. Yeah.
Is it out yet?
It comes out a week from Sunday.
Oh, cool.
So yeah.
And that's what it's going to be called, Just Love.
Yeah, it's called Just Love. I mean, I think it's called Just Love Volume 1. And it's just a collection of I don't know, for lack of a better term, spiritual music. I hate to use that word, but it's topical too. Like there's some songs that are sort of rooted in a kind of traditional Jewish kind of mysticism, and there's some that are more Christian, and some that are there's a song based on a Rumi, who's a Muslim Sufi. poem, and some original stuff that's more like there's a song about refugee situation.
Okay.
There's a song about what else is on there? There's a variety of stuff. It's not
okay.
It's not.
Well, I'm gonna ask everybody to look out for that. Go to all your iTunes things and support that project. It's called Just Love. Is there a name of the artist or artist?
No, it's just called Just Love, and I think you can find it. I think you can only find it on Facebook right now, but it's Just Love,
okay.
one word. And and the CDs, I think they're free. I don't know if they'll ship them out for free. You might have to pay for shipping, but the CDs themselves are free. So it's a cool group of people, and people from all different kind of faith groups. There are a couple of Christian folks. A rabbi a friend of mine is the one who runs it, and someone like me who doesn't really have a faith in that sense. They're very totally cool with that. So it's everybody's pretty welcome.
Man, that's great. That's great. Well, hey, we're running out of time here, and I got to tell you, man, it's been great talking to you. I'm glad we had a part 2.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
it's an honor.
2 very distinctly different conversations.
Yeah,
and that's great. And me and Jimmy are gonna show up one day at your door.
Come on. Have him bring a guitar.
Yeah,
we'll break out that old Ludwig kit and make some noise.
Yeah, man, and sleeping bags and stuff like that.
I got beds at the house. You don't have to, unless you want to camp out. We're getting kind of old for that, brother.
Yeah, I know. It's hard enough getting out of bed.
Well, you guys are always welcome. Well, you let me know, and I'll set up a club gig, and we'll go down there and tear some stuff up.
Cool. You're on. Well, thanks, Rich, and
pleasure.
If I don't talk to you before Christmas, have a merry one, and we love you much.
Thank you. Love you too. Have a Merry Christmas.
All right, you too. Thanks, bro.
Bye-bye.
All right, see ya.